Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for choosing to watch my video, and if you would subscribe it, like it, all that stuff, that'd be great. Otherwise, enjoy the video, and I hope it gives you the information you need and is helpful to you. Take care. Be an overview probably for a clutch replacement on a 2010 Hyundai Elantra 2.0 liter. We've got this duct right here. Two 10mm bolts. Hold it in place right here. Then it fits in this tube here. It'll come out. Then you can take this air cleaner out. You get a 10mm bolt here on that stud. 10mm for this clamp here. Hose clamp right here. Probably mass airflow sensor. Squeeze the sides and release it. And there's a bolt back here as well, 10mm. And we can kind of lift and twist this out. Has a computer connected to it, but you can leave that probably connected. 10mm bolt and 10mm bolt, little guide pin. Then we kind of get down to the transmission. 12mm bolt here for this battery cable. Also disconnected here. 10mm bolt or nut. 12mm bolt here for this bracket for the clutch slave cylinder. Clips and washers were here. For the 2-shift cables right here. I got it tucked away already. Little disc on top. Then there's 3 12mm bolts. I left one in place because I couldn't get this out of here. Maybe I'll show how to get that out at some point, but I could not get it to slide out of here. I know those little metal pieces hold it in place. Terminal, push the terminal here. This slides off studs here. $17mm bolts. Got a bracket there. Bracket here. Actually fits right there. 12mm bolt. 12mm bolts for the bracket. For the shifter, which we talked about. Most of these you can squeeze the sides to get them focus. You can squeeze these to pop them out of their little brackets. Two 17mm bolts here for the transmission. I jacked up the transmission so it would stay up and then took the bolts out. $17mm bolts for the transmission. I think that is almost everything up on top. And mostly that bracketry with that harness down here is just a pain in the butt. You have to fight with that. I think we'll be going up in the air then. and checking stuff underneath. Take that shield off, we'll take the tire off. We'll be popping the CV axle out. Probably we get a pry bar right in here and pry it out. Pry for both sides as well. So let's get those pieces off, little shields and the tire off. All right, now down here underneath the dash is a 12mm bolt for the steering column. Let me disconnect that. Just use a 12mm ratchet wrench, and this should just slide up and off. There's splines on there, and I think this can go on many ways, so you're gonna maybe have to put it on a couple different times to make sure the steering wheel stays straight. We'll see once we get that actually off, and I'll let you know. So you want the steering wheel to be straight, and you also probably want to use a bungee cord or something and tie it down. You don't want this spinning once it's free from the power steering rack, because if you spin this without the power steering rack attached, you'll break wires inside here. Most likely, most every vehicle has what's called a clock spring with wires inside of it that only go so far, and after you go further than that, you break wires. So I'll zip tie this after we take it off. You can see it's pretty straight right now, so you know where your steering wheel is when you drove it before, so you can make adjustments under the dash if you move the shaft on the splines a little bit. You probably get it right back where you want it eventually, not always the first time. So we're going to disconnect that, and then we'll see about dropping the subframe. Because they do want you to drop the subframe, I got my setup here. For you on your car, you might be able to put some a towel or something down on the frame, on the fender, on both sides, and lay a 4x4 across it, and maybe a ratchet strap or two right there. That might work for you. So otherwise I'll talk later maybe about another way to possibly do it without taking off the subframe. Alright, so I got a 17mm on each side. There's a flat spot on this side that you can put a wrench on. Fits pretty good. We'll be taking this stabilizer bar end link off of here. You can do it in either spot, top or bottom. I'm going to do it down here on both sides. What I'll probably be doing these are probably 17mm bolts here, and the same on the other side. And also, of course, some big bolts here, probably 17mm here, and here. And here we got probably 17 and 14mm. And then over here, again, 17 and 14mm. And we've got an engine mount, 4 bolts here. And up here as well, engine mount. So on this one, we might just take off this 14mm nut here, and bolt setup might be the easiest to get to. And we have fluid leaking out because this blew out because there's something going on causing a lot of resistance, I believe, inside the transmission. It makes noise. So I've given you the overview, and that's what we'll be taking apart. My one tip for not dropping the subframe if you're out in the backyard and don't have all this equipment, one thing that I've done on other Hyundais, and they have more space, is this gap right here. Now for the transmission, it needs to be about 9 inches, as that's how fat the transmission is, and you can slide it through here. Right now we're at 8 inches by dropping this down, and I do have that engine support up top, so it's not going to come any further down. However, if you're not supporting it up above, you can put a jack on your transmission probably, and a jack here. Take your bolts out over here, and then you can lower it down. And if you can get 9 inches in this hole, and we'll take the bolts out, loosen the bolts on the other side too to help it drop down some. If you can get 9 inches, you can actually probably just slide the transmission back through this hole enough to get access to everything in here. So that is a possibility I'm throwing out there for you to do. So we got the bolts out. Got this disconnected. Then we'll be disconnecting this here and the other two bolts over here. Then we'll see about, as we mentioned already, disconnecting the mounts and dropping the subframe down. Alright, so we actually removed the through bolt up here on this one. Kind of forgot because of the power steering rack. Don't bother doing these. Through bolt here, 14 millimeter and 14 millimeter right there as well. And these bolts are 19 millimeter, not 17 millimeter, the big bolts on the ends here. I don't know if you can see, we actually got like a ½ an inch of there. Haven't done that one yet, so once we drop this, might get more drop over here as we're talking about trying to squeeze it through there as a possibility for you. So we're also removing the cotter key in here on this castle nut. It's probably 17 millimeter. Do that to both sides. Come on now. $17 millimeter it is. So we'll loosen this up almost to the tip top there, and we'll give this a couple taps and should free this from the steering knuckle. And we'll do the same for the other side. So we almost have 9 inches to make it through here. All right, lots of space with that out of the way. Two 12 millimeter bolts here for the clutch slave cylinder right there. Fluid all over the place. There's our subframe rubber mount for the exhaust too. These little things can come off, so keep an eye on these. Two 10 millimeter bolts for a wiring harness here on this end. Still don't quite trust the engine mount, so I got it supported down here as well. So we'll pop out, drain the fluid, 17 millimeter, and we'll get our pry bar in here and pry this out. And the same with the other side. I'll bungee cord that up. We'll do the same for this side and bungee it up. Here's a starter, also we unbolted from up top. We'll just swing that out and put it aside. We'll start taking out our 14mm bolts down here. That one there. And that one up there. And then we should be able to separate our transmission from our engine. 14mm bolts, left to loosen, right to tighten for all bolts. One hidden bolt here on the transmission side. Just leave that dangling up there. Bolts are out. That's loose but not out yet. You can see the transmission was starting to separate a little bit with this. Couple dowel pins somewhere on the transmission or engine, so it won't just necessarily fall down here yet. We'll loosen up that last bolt, get our jack stand underneath here. Support the transmission. See what happens here. Separating, we got bits and pieces falling out. It's separated, and now what I probably should have done before is gone up top and lower the engine / transmission assembly down so we can clear this corner. So I'll be going up and turning a screw. All right, let's check out this. Oh, look at that. We've got some issues, I think. Some excessive grooving there. That is unfortunate. interesting because this nose cone here on that Toyota pickup truck was also mangled due to the actually the pilot bearing. This is a throw-up bearing. Did some mangling. So we'll get to something's getting replaced on this. So yeah, no, there's no cracks in my lens on this camera at all. Nope, we're all good. All right, let's take a look at this transmission and why you need to turn your radio down once in a while. The clutch pedal went to the floor. There was no resistance anymore. I have not touched this, just took the transmission out, and you can see we have some damage here. What are the odds that it was making noise before this just suddenly stopped working? So, why don't you turn your radio down once in a while, maybe once a week, drive it, listen for noises, then turn the radio back up, but you can avoid costly additional repairs by keeping your ears open and your radio down once in a while. Brake noises, clunking, throw-up bearing, pilot bearings, all kinds of noises. Turn your radios down, boys and girls. Save yourself some money. All right, then we got our 12mm bolts here for the clutch pressure plate. Clutch disc is on the inside. We can unbolt that and see what we got going on. We submit some chunks and pieces in here. Clean that stuff out. Sitting on the dowel, so it should probably stay there without falling off. Come on now, brother. Feels like a 17mm 12-point socket. You want to get this machined or replace it. Don't just throw a new clutch in there. It sits on a little ledge. Here's your rear main seal, looking pretty nice and dry. That's good. You see oil back here. Might be a good time to replace it. That is removing your transmission, manual transmission clutch on your 2010 Hyundai Elantra. Here's your dowel pins we were talking about for alignment. So there we go. All right, so this is actually a 1990 Toyota pickup truck SR5, but the procedure's the same for the Hyundai Elantra, which I already did. I forgot to shoot the rest of the video, but we got your clutch disc, your pressure plate. You want to match them up and make sure they're the same. Got your machined flywheel or replaced flywheel. Now on the Hyundai, it does not have a pilot bearing, so you don't really have to worry about that as much, but they do give you a guide to center it. So you'll still put it up there, put your centerpiece in there, and it's basically centered. And then you can slide your pressure plate over the top put it on the dowels, and then we'll screw it down. And I like to give it a little snug and then make sure this goes in and out freely and is not catching on anything, because I think that'll help once you guide your transmission in there as well. So you want to lubricate your splines. They give you some spline grease. Lubricate your splines with a little packet of grease they give you usually. You got your throw-up bearing here that you'll want to grease up the internal part there. Some grease on here. A little wheel bearing grease on here. Be nice and free. I mean, this is a little different than the Hyundai that you're working on, but same principle again. I think you'll notice the Hyundai does not have this. Nose cone, I believe, is the difference. So, a little grease on there. You don't want a ton on there because you don't want it flicking all over the place, but you do want some on there. So, bolt that on. I'll give you the torque specs for that. And so, we got this started, got a couple bolts in, but you can see there's still some movement a little bit. So I just try and get a good feel to get it centered again and make sure it goes in and out. Although without the pilot bearing, it won't matter as much on the Hyundai. So we'll snug this down and we'll just make sure that this goes in and out nice and easy. And then we'll of course torque the bolts down. I'll give you the torque specs on the Hyundai, probably for the flywheel and the pressure plate here. And we'll do that, get the transmission installed. And I try and do a real good job of matching the angle of the transmission and the engine. And of course, aligning the dowel pins. Where is there? I guess it only has one dowel pin. Oh, there's one up top on this vehicle. So look for your dowel pins, I think, on the Hyundai. There's one on each side. So when I put my transmission in and it's close, I try and make sure the angle of the engine and transmission is even. And make it a lot easier. And then also the rotation of the transmission, so we'll get it straight as possible. Of course, onto the bolts and the dowel pins. The bolts, do a few turns at a time and do it in a crisscross pattern. You're going to notice these fingers are going to start to go down, and you don't want to. They say they can bind if you do like one side only. If you tighten one bolt down all the way, they say it can bind. I've never seen it. I've never tried to do it. I just follow the directions. It says crisscross pattern. Do it slowly, bring it down to the proper torque, and you'll see the fingers all kind of walk their way down to this flat spot here. So, and that's it for that. Again, torque specs coming up. Right, I'm putting back together this clutch job on this Hyundai. One thing that I think I made a mistake on was, okay, we got the engine mount down here. We'll leave this engine mount here, 2 bolts here. I leave these all connected, and got mount on this end and a mount on the other end. And when you drop the subframe, if that's the route you go, then you've got it supported on both ends. I was kind of wrong. I had to undone that and then lifted the vehicle up, I believe, and had my jack underneath it, and I didn't really need that till much later, and made getting the cross member out, subframe out, a little tougher with that red stand in the way. So one idea when you're doing this is kind of leave this more towards the end if you can. Take 75 W85 fluid. Here's the drain, 17 millimeter right here. Here's the fluid add right here. So you just fill it up until it starts coming out the fill hole, and then it's full.